I tell you, it is so much fun sitting here and looking at you watch this. Because that tells me this is totally going to be preaching to the choir. It's just a room full of English majors. And I actually know who you really are. You're all Downton Abbey addicts, and you're hoping that I'm going to tell you something about the next season. Yes, I'm not. No, let's be very clear. I, Claudius. I can talk about I, Claudius. I cannot talk about Downton. Wait. We do have a question and answer period. And I would just as soon go straight to the question and answer period, but I'm supposed to talk to you a little bit before that and warm you up or something. So I'll just do a little bit of talking, but think of your questions. I love to answer questions. They remind me of things, and it's much easier than this. So I'm going to read you a little something from the book. But in fact, that's what I'm going to do right first of all. So you'll have a sense of what it's like and maybe why I wrote it. Is that a good idea? Okay. So you've all been sitting here for a while. You've probably already read the first part, but I will just quickly say, I'm not going to read you the introduction by Kenneth Branagh, but you should read that. The first part of it is called the preface. That's the prologue. Actually, it's called prologue, just like Shakespeare. And it goes like this. This will give you a little idea of why I wrote it. It says, on a warm summer day in 2009, I was sitting on the screen porch of my house in Kennebunkport, Maine, reading an American novel and falling asleep. My phone rang with a call from Laura Mackey. She's the head of drama at ITV, the largest commercial network in the UK. She often tips me off to new British series that I might be interested in for Masterpiece. We chat, we catch up. Rebecca, she says, do you know Julian Fellows? Just a writer, I say. Gosford Park, Mary Poppins. I know his work. I don't know him. Maybe he's an actor. She tells me about an upcoming miniseries he's written that she's very excited about. A family saga set on a spectacular country estate. Early 1900s, American heiress whose money keeps things afloat, beautiful frocks, a family downstairs of complicated servants. She tells me directly that she thinks it's going to be very, very good and that the production needs Masterpiece co-production money to fill the financing gap. I've known Laura and liked her for years. She has good taste and very savvy television judgment. I listen, and then I think to myself, well, this project sounds a lot like a combination of Edith Wharton's The Buccaneers, which you know we did. We've already done that, and Upstairs, Downstairs, of which we've aired 68 episodes from 1971 to 1975, and which we're about to remake with the BBC. Does Masterpiece really need another aristocratic family, charming servant miniseries? Yes. Probably not. I tell Laura, no thanks. We chat about the London weather, and I go back to my book. I have been very, very lucky in my career, in spite of myself. So the book goes on to, for some reason, they, Viking Penguin, wanted a memoir about Masterpiece, but they didn't want a coffee table book. They wanted an inside story, and I thought, oh, that's okay. I can tell about the time I hung out with Judi Dench or Jeremy Brett. I can tell some of that. Some of those stories I can't tell because of legal action, but I can tell some of them. And they said, no, we don't want just that. We think in this age of Lean In, do you know the book, Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In? We think people would be interested in hearing what it's like to be a 20th century woman, a late 20th century woman working in television, being a television executive, raising a family, kind of in a man's world, how you did all that. And I said, I don't think so, because first of all, it was the 60s and 70s, and as you all know, I'm looking around this room, if you lived in the 60s and 70s, you don't remember a lot of what happened in the 60s and 70s. But I had never kept a journal, and more than that, I had been taught to hide my light under a bushel, to stay behind the curtain, both in my family and specifically with my actress mother. And so it took me a long time. I called Russell Baker. He kind of talked me into it. I write about that a little bit too. So I'll read you just the end of it, and then I promise we aren't going to talk about me anymore. We really are going to talk about Masterpiece. But after I had written this book, I realized I had been given the greatest gift possible, which was to be able to sit and think about my life, one's life. You know, all of us have these stories to tell, and how lucky to be able to tell one. So it ends like this, and it says, it's now almost a year since I started writing this book. I did end up writing it in a year. In that old house in Maine. Ironically, as hard as it was to write it, it's harder to stop. I worry, will anyone read it? Have I said too much or too little? Have I done justice to the Masterpiece Theater story? Probably, hard to say. Masterpiece lives on, and a hot and September day several years ago, I actually moved from my family house of 25 years to an apartment in Cambridge. A group of friends helped me unpack. It was like a military maneuver. One person washed the china, another made up the beds, and someone else put the books on the shelves. It was a spectacular act of friendship. Somebody, I'm not sure who, deployed all the framed family pictures. They were placed rather randomly on mantelpieces, tables, and countertops. I've never rearranged them because I love the effect. I've thought constantly about families, communities, and generations as I've written this book, starting with the Forsytes, through the Bellamys, the Jarndyces, the Dorrits, the Bennets, and the Crawleys. And of course, I've thought about the dramas in my own family. Everyone's here in my house. My grandmother in the 1900 lace dress. My daughter Catherine wearing a pair of cockeyed sunglasses at age 3. My brother Jeremy and me having a fist fight. I feel surrounded and buoyed by these pictures and their backstories as I write and pace and rewrite and rip up. Somewhat eerily, there is only one family picture in my bedroom. It was placed on an antique dresser across from my bed in such a way that it's the first thing I see in the morning and the last thing I see at night. I've never moved it. It's a black and white portrait of my mother, Catherine, taken when she was just a little older than my daughter, Catherine. My mother was living in New York at the time and just beginning her career in theater. So is Catherine now. The picture is a posed publicity shot, and my mother looks serene and pensive. It's not the way I remember her, but I know it's the person she tried to be. I used to find this picture incredibly glamorous, and I wished I could be as perfect as my mother seemed to be. Now I find it complicated and touching, and I understand that because of her life in drama, and because she shared it so well with me, and because of my merry father's love for words, I have a job that I love and am able to write a book about a program famous for its great drama and exemplary writing. I think back and see the bookworm that I was, and I see the younger me who used to wander around this house, lost in the fantasy of becoming whatever character I'd seen in a movie, and I see my good fortune. I've had the enormous good luck to grow up and work as I used to play, and there's nothing better. So, now you don't have to buy it. So that was the context of it, but it really is Masterpiece's memoir. And I started producing Masterpiece when it was 15 years old. I had watched it, as you had, from my couch in my nightie watching Alistair Cooke, and then all of a sudden I was Alistair Cooke's boss. I was terrified. He was frosty. And as I write, we became friends, and he became extremely dear to me, as did Diana Rigg and Russell Baker, and even now, Laura Linney and Alan Cumming. So those people are the celebrities, but the real stars, of course, are the people who make these programs. They are all made in England. We license them, PBS, through WGBH, the station where I work. We license them, we rent them, we co-produce them, so we get to read the scripts. We get to be involved in the casting and in the cutting of them. But they really are made by those wonderful drama producers in England who I think write and make the best drama in the world. We recently struck it rich with that show. And it's interesting. It and Sherlock have catapulted Masterpiece into a whole other orbit. We were doing fine. There have been ups and downs over the past 42 years, which is how old Masterpiece is. But all of a sudden, along came Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock Holmes. And when he arrived in that show written by Stephen Moffat, we seemed to have drawn the attention of a whole new and younger audience, which is just what we need. Because if the audience remained like most of us, we wouldn't be able to grow it. And it's very hard to get younger people to come in, but we have begun to figure out how to get them in. Social media is one really important way. And having gorgeous young actors is another way. Every now and then you have to put one of them under a car and have an accident to cause a lot of attention. But that helps too. So Benedict has been huge, and he, as so many of these actors, Emma Thompson and Ralph Fiennes and Helen Mirren, so many of them were on Masterpieces for years, and you saw them. And you're probably seeing them now in the Paradise, if you're watching the Paradise. And then all of a sudden, they'll strike it rich. An agent will see them, a producer will see them, and they will go into a feature film career, as Helen did. Helen Mirren, who used to call Prime Suspect, there were 7 of them. We called them PS1, PS2. She called them PMS1, PMS2, PMS3. She's tough, as is darling Diana Rigg, who is still working. She was nominated for an Emmy for Game of Thrones. She's in Game. She's hardly recognizable. She's chosen to go the unreconstructed look, if you know what I mean. And her beautiful daughter Rachel. For those of you who are watching Bletchley Circle, it's not on Masterpiece but on PBS. Her daughter Rachel Sterling plays one of the code breakers. She has dark hair and looks exactly like Diana Rigg. She was in an Inspector Lewis as a person of ambiguous sexuality. Yes, you can hear in her voice, you can hear Diana's voice. So Diana used to come from London. She lived in London, and she used to come over and tell us exactly who was doing what to who and how often. She was full of gossip, some of which was in this book before the lawyers got a hold of it. So the book is a combination of those reminiscences and also a little bit behind the scenes of how these programs are made and how they end up on PBS, how I go about programming them. So, as my colleague Alistair Cooke said, thank you for your kind patronage and attention.